Laura, we often get stories coming in about people claiming they've got royal ancestors. It's usually a myth or a story. I mean, you've got form on this, haven't you?
Yes,
Upsetting
I
John
have.
Hurt.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we don't talk about that.
Oh, I do. You thought he was the Marquis of Sligo, or at least related to him, and you basically took great delight in saying that he wasn't. Live on television.
Yeah, and he was quite upset about it, which now I feel really bad about.
Well, don't worry. Well, I say don't worry. It's a common thing that people assume there's a link because they've heard a story or there's a name passed down. Our job really is to have a look at some of the evidence and say yes or no. Balance of probability is a phrase I like a lot. Now, I've been sent this quite recent case. It relates to somebody who thinks they are related to King George VI. In fact, an illegitimate son of George VI.
Right.
So, we've got a few details. It all seems to boil down to corgis and events in 1938. So, the family eventually moved to Australia and were always presented to the royal family whenever they came over. The idea being that this chap was the half-brother of the Queen. Now, the thing about royal affairs is they're always covered up if they ever happened. And to solve this, I think we either need DNA, but I've done a bit of digging to see whether there's any sort of truth in the story at all.
Okay, hold on a minute. So you're saying that this person is the half-brother of the Queen of England today?
That's right, yes.
Right.
Quite a claim, isn't it?
It is quite a claim, and it's one that I've never heard of before. I think with something this recent, you would have expected to have heard even just like the slight whisper of a story like this, I would have thought.
I'm just telling you now.
Okay.
I mean, here's the whisper.
What evidence have you got?
Well, the fact that Jeremy was actually born in 1938, and there was certainly a Welsh Corgi League founded by Thelma, probably with some royal support in the same year. But the most telling thing is that they emigrated to Australia a few years later, and every time a royal visit took place, Jeremy and Thelma were presented to the royal family, greeted as one of their own, and given very preferential treatment. Now, why would they do that? These obscure dog breeders from Surrey, going halfway around the world and being given such treatment.
We know how much the Queen loves her corgis. Surely it was just because Thelma was a corgi breeder, I would have thought. I don't know. Do we know who the father was on Jeremy's birth certificate? Or
We need to order that, but according to the marriage records, it would be someone called Phil Gray. Oh. So we need DNA. So if you can nip down to the palace and get a swab from one of the royals, we might be able to do something with it. So, okay, I admit it's probably not the strongest story in the world, but it does show this whole thing about rumour and hearsay as opposed to hard facts. Anyway, what have you got? See if you can beat that story.
Well, one of my readers has written in to say that one day he went on a shopping trip to Sheffield, or his wife went out shopping, and he popped into the record office.
As you do.
Yes, and in the record office he found this one document which he thinks shows a connection between one of his wife's ancestors and King Canute.
Hold on, King Canute, let's hold back the waves. Bit mad.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Hold on, that's thousands of years ago.
Yes, and he reckons that he's got the family tree back to about 700 AD, which is much better than, well, certainly me, I know that much.
Well, I think most people, apart from the royal family, would struggle to go back to 700 AD.
According to our reader Alan Brosnan, his wife has a gateway ancestor called Sarah Styring, and this is his wife's great-great-grandmother, who was born in Sheffield in 1819. And I know you can tell me all about gateway ancestors because it's one of your favourite topics.
Basically somebody who is a well-known historical figure who's been written about by historians and who've got an established pedigree, usually back to a member of the aristocracy or through the military to the royal family. So a gateway ancestor is someone we should all look for if we think we've got this royal connection.
So Sarah Styring married Alfred Morton in Sheffield in 1839, and somewhere in this marriage there is then a connection right the way back through. We've got John and Robert Styring of York living in 1420 and 1392, back to the first Earl of Shrewsbury. And from there on, it goes right the way back to King Canute.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose there's an unusual surname, and there is at least I suppose there's a document, I'll give you that. But there's an awful lot of work to prove that link, I'd have thought.
Well, part of the problem is that Alan doesn't actually have a copy of this pedigree that he found in the archives. He's just taken rough notes.
Well, at least it exists. Is there a reference for it?
Yes, there's a reference. And it was drawn up by a Harold Styring in 1963. So I think the first thing to do would be to get a copy of that and then go and use as many other records as possible to try to verify the information in it. Perhaps using the College of Arms and Burke's Peerage and so on.
Oh, sounds like a promising story. Okay, maybe slightly stronger than mine.
Maybe. Well, yeah.
All right, calm down. What else have you got?
I've had an email from another reader called Stan Cornford. It's a bit of a rambling email, but it raises some interesting points.
This is a podcast, not a one adult documentary, so if we can...
Well, according to Stan Cornford, he is related to King Edward I by being his 20 times great-grandson, his 19 times great-grandnephew, his 20 times great-grandnephew, and a distant cousin.
4 times over then?
Yes. And
okay.
he explains how this is possible, because he says that he's put all of the names on his family tree into some software on his computer, and it's shown up all these various connections. And he has worked out, although I haven't verified the maths, that if you trace your family tree back, say, 330 years, he's given as an example, you would have 9 times great-grandfathers alive. No, you'd have 1,024 9 times great-grandfathers alive.
That's a lot of them.
Exactly. And if you go back 630 years, you're looking at more than 1 million great-grandfathers. And as he quite rightly points out, I mean, there wouldn't be enough people on the earth for this to be possible for all of us unless they had intermingled and, there were some crossed relationships there.
Stop being so shy. The word's incest.
Yes, that's the word.
Well, at a discrete cousin level, 4
Yeah.
times removed. But yeah, it's still within the same family group. Yeah, the maths doesn't stack up otherwise.
No, not really. And the point that he makes is that therefore it's quite likely that all of us have got a connection to aristocracy somewhere along the line, no matter how humble our roots initially seem. So I quite like that idea, yeah.
That would make sense. We tend to get lost in the fog of agricultural labourers, but one of those 1,000 people could have had slightly better blood, and then we can get back in. I mean, yeah, someone once quoted that there was 20% of us had a definite link to the royal family. So, yeah, I suppose there's something in it. But again, proving that connection. So if he's done all the groundwork, then, yeah.
Yeah, we're
probably have a
taking his
little
word
look
for it
at
at the moment.
Okay. If you've got any stories about royalty, please send them in to us. Any gateway ancestors that you've found, any rumours of illegitimacy lurking in your family tree, which may well have a royal connection, send them into admin, ADMIN, at sra-uk.com, and there is a prize of 1 copy of the King's Speech to the best story we receive. Please keep them short though, 200 words maximum, because as you've seen, it does take quite a while to go through these.